Putin wants to negotiate a ceasefire. He says we stop conflict with the borders on the territories we have occupied. Putin says he's ready to negotiate Ukraine's ceasefire, but warns Kiev and West if they don't respond. Russian President Vladimir Putin is ready to end the war in Ukraine and negotiate a ceasefire that recognizes the current battle lines, 4 Russian sources told Reuters, but added that Putin was ready to continue to fight if Kiev and the West do not respond. So he's asking for peace, in other words. 3 of the sources with knowledge of the discussion in Putin's circle said the veteran Russian leader expressed frustration to a small group of advisors over what he sees as Western-backed attempts to derail the negotiations, as well as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's decision to block the talks. Putin can fight as long as he wants, but Putin is also ready for a ceasefire to freeze the war, said the 4th source, a senior Russian person who has worked with Putin and has knowledge of the talks that take place between high-ranking officials in the Kremlin. Reuters spoke of a total of 5 people who had worked with Putin at a high level in politics and business. The 5th source did not comment on the possibility of the conflict freezing on the current front lines. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov responded to a request for comment, said the Kremlin chief has repeatedly made clear that Russia is open to dialogue to achieve its goals, saying the country does not want perpetual war. Ukraine's foreign and defense ministers did not respond to inquiries. Last week's appointment of economist Andrei Belousov as Russia's defense minister was seen by some Western military and political analysts as a move that puts the Russian economy on a permanent state of war in order to achieve victory in a protracted conflict. This decision following pressure on the battlefield and advances by the Russians in recent weeks. But the sources said Putin, who was re-elected in March to a new 6-year term, would prefer to use Russia's current momentum to put the war behind him. They did not immediately comment on the new defense minister. Based on what they know of discussions in the upper echelons of the Kremlin, 2 of the sources said that Putin is of the view that the gains so far in the war are enough for him to be able to sell a victory to the Russian people. Europe's biggest land conflict since World War II has cost lives, and now they're sweeping sanctions against the Russian economy. 3 sources said Putin understands that any major new advance will still require nationwide conscription, which he does not want. Nationwide conscription terrified parts of the population in Russia, causing hundreds of thousands of conscripts to flee the country. Polls showed Putin's popularity dropped by several points. Peskov stated that Russia does not need conscription and instead recruits contract volunteers into the armed forces. The prospect of a ceasefire or even peace talks seems remote at the moment. Zelensky has repeatedly stated that a peace on Putin's terms is unsustainable. He has vowed to take back lost territory, including Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014. In 2022, he signed a decree formally declaring any talks with Putin impossible. One of the sources predicted that no deal would be possible while Zelensky is in power unless Russia bypasses him and reaches a deal with Washington. But U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, speaking in Kiev last week, told reporters he did not believe Putin was interested in serious negotiations. Conversations in Switzerland. Ukraine is preparing to host talks in Switzerland next month and aim to unify views internationally on how to end the war. The talks are being called at the initiative of Zelensky, who has said that Putin will not attend. Switzerland has not invited Russia. Moscow has said the talks are not credible without its own presence there. Ukraine and Switzerland want Russia's allies, including China, to join. Speaking in China on May 17, Putin has said Ukraine might use the talks in Switzerland to persuade a wider group of countries to back Zelensky's demand for complete withdrawal of Russian forces. The Swiss foreign minister did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Putin said, "In China, we are ready for discussions. We never refused." The Kremlin maintains it does not comment on the progress of what it calls a special military operation in Ukraine, has repeatedly said Moscow is open to the idea of talks based on the new realities on the ground. Responding to a request on the matter, the questions on the matter, the U.S. Department of State spokesman said any peace initiative must respect Ukraine's territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, and described Russia as the only obstacle to a peace in Ukraine. The spokesman said the Kremlin has yet to show any real interest in ending its conflict, quite the opposite. Kiev argues that Putin, whose aides have repeatedly denied that he was plotting before invading Ukraine in 2022, is a man who cannot be trusted to keep a deal. Russia and Ukraine have also said they fear the other side will use any ceasefire to rearm. Putin's insistence on locking in any territorial gains in a deal is non-negotiable, all sources said. Putin, however, would be prepared to compromise on the territory he now holds and freeze the conflict on the current front lines, for the sources said. Putin will say that we won, that NATO attacked us, and that we maintained our sovereignty, and that we have a land corridor to Crimea, which is true, said one of the sources. A freeze of the conflict along current lines would result in Russia holding significant parts of 4 Ukraine regions, which Putin formally incorporated into Russia in September 2022, but without full control in none of them. And such an arrangement would fall short of the goals set by Moscow itself at the time, when it declared that the 4 Ukrainian regions, Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, now belong entirely to it. Peskov said there can be no case of returning the 4 regions that are now permanently part of Russia, according to its constitution. And another factor shaping the Kremlin's chief's view of ending the conflict is that the longer it drags on, the more hardened veterans return to Russia, dissatisfied with their post-war job and income prospects, a fact which will likely create tensions in society, said one of the sources who has worked with Putin. Putin relies on Russia's numerically large population compared to Ukraine to maintain a large manpower even without conscription, thanks to unusually high economic benefits for those who join the military. Russia will push further, said the source who has worked with Putin. Putin will slowly seize territory until Zelinsky makes an offer to end the conflict, the person said, saying the Russian leader has expressed the view to advisors that the West will not provide enough at denting Ukraine's morale. And the US and European leader countries have declared they will stand by Ukraine until there are guarantees of its secure sovereignty. NATO countries and their allies say they're trying to speed up arms deliveries. So we'll see what happens with this. Will they come to an end of this conflict? We'll see in the next few days what transpires, what will be revealed. We hope for peace, obviously. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.